Okay, so we're recording this, and Facebook Live doesn't seem to be working yet, so hopefully it'll kick in at some point, and we'll all be able to share it there. So first of all, I just want to thank everyone for joining us tonight. This is Peer's May meeting on Zoom. It's our second Zoom gathering. And we're really thrilled to have with us this evening three special people in our community: our Assemblymember Fred Thiele, Sister Mary Beth Moore from Centro, Corazon de Maria, and Sandra Dunn from OLA. Before we begin, I just want to say that if there's anybody here who is not already on Peer's email list, if you want to just put your email in the chat, we'll add you to the list going forward so that you will get our periodic emails. I'll mention that our next meeting is going to be on June 11. I'm admitting someone else, June 11, which is a Thursday, and we're really happy to have Larry Norden back with us. Larry is the director of the Brennan Center Election Reforms Program, and he is going to be talking about protecting our vote November and beyond. So as most of you know, PEER is a multi-issue progressive grassroots organization, and we're committed to advocating for social, racial, environmental, and economic justice for all through electoral politics and activist issue-oriented engagements. We are a chapter of NYPAN, New York Progressive Action Network, which is a statewide organization with over 30 chapters. Our primary focuses are on healthcare, the environment, immigration, and election reform. And tonight we decided to gather together these three individuals in our community so that we can have a talk on the impact of COVID-19, specifically on the East End, both on the residents and on the election to come. So here's a summary of the format that we'll have tonight. We're going to start with Fred just giving us an overview about what's happening in the region. Then we will go to Sister Mary Beth and Sandra to talk about what their organizations are doing. Then we'll have some questions and a period for questions and answers. After that, we're going to pivot back to Fred to talk about elections and what's going on both, I guess, in the primary and also maybe a little bit about what's happening up in Albany. So let's, I think, I'll get a show. Does anybody raise their hand if I've missed anything? Okay, very good. Well, let's, Fred, if you could take it away. Thank you so very much for always being willing to just, step forward, come and speak with us at the drop of a dime and let us know what's happening, in particular at this time. Welcome.
Well, thank you. Thanks to Peer for inviting me to participate and to be part of this. I'm for somebody who's onward in years, I've been technologically challenged. I've figured out Zoom and have had to do this, participated with Zoom in quite a few meetings, including a Democratic Party conference with the Assembly. So it's been a very effective way of continuing to communicate with people in the district. And I want to thank Peer for setting this up and giving me the opportunity to meet with you and to talk. Obviously, the East End of Long Island, where as part of the the greater New York area, Long Island has been one of the areas that has been particularly hard hit by the COVID virus. On the East End, I would say, if you look at the number of cases and the hospitalizations, et cetera, compared with New York City and Nassau County and Western Suffolk, we have not been impacted as far as the number of cases nearly as much. Suffolk County has a map which lists the number of cases that are in each town and each hamlet. That information provides us with some information. I wouldn't rely on it with scientific certainty, a lot of that information. But generally, I think we can say that, the incidence of cases on the East End have been less than they've been in Western Suffolk and Nassau and New York City. And for the reasons that you would imagine, population density is a big factor. And I think mass transit, subway, the Long Island Railroad played a big part early on in helping to transmit this virus as people were on crowded trains and subways, et cetera. Something that we have less of out here. So we've certainly had our share of cases. Southampton Hospital really had to gear up and expand their capacity. At the peak, Southampton Hospital had about 54, I think was the maximum number of COVID cases that they had. At the maximum, I think they had roughly about 15 patients that were on ventilators. Now that those numbers are down, the number of patients is down in the low 20s, and the number of people on ventilators has been around 9 or 10 for a while. And Peconic Bay Medical Center has been similar, but obviously the shutdown here has also had a major impact on the economy. We're a service-based economy. I was saying before we went on the air here, my office is spending an incredible amount of time helping people with unemployment, particularly those that wouldn't have previously been eligible for unemployment, those that were independent contractors or sole proprietors who now under the new rules are eligible. And it's really been difficult for people to be able to get through the unemployment insurance process, and it still is 2 months later. So there's been a big economic impact here on the East End as far as loss of employment. One of the things that we have seen out here is that the number of people that have come to stay out on the East End with their second homes. I tell people, this number all the time. A lot of times they don't believe it, but from the Shinnecock Canal east, 2/3 of all the homes in my district are second homes, 2/3. And that there has been an incredible exodus to the East End during this time. And a couple of things I would say about that. And one certainly would be, we saw with the PSE&G, the electric utility numbers, the use of electricity is up 27% over the period last year, to just kind of tell you how many people are out here. However, it has not had the impact on overall, I think, on public health. People were worried that there would be a spike in cases out here with people coming east. That hasn't really been the case thus far. We really haven't seen that. If you were going to read the New York Post, you would have thought it was the French Revolution out here. But obviously there's been some inconveniences, in supermarkets and things of that nature. So, listen, we've been as impacted as anybody. There's a lot of focus now on reopening. I'm just gonna talk about the reopening process a little bit, because that's really what has been news this week. And the governor has divided up the state into 10 regions, and Long Island is one of those regions, Nassau and Suffolk County. He has established 7 criteria for reopening, which are health-based criteria, hospital capacity, things such as new hospitalizations, hospital deaths, things of that nature. 7 criteria. 3 areas of the state have met those criteria already and will be beginning to open up on May 15th, on Friday. Those areas are the Finger Lakes, the Southern Tier, and the Mohawk Valley, kind of the upstate, the central area. Long Island has met 5 of those 7 criteria. And the 2 that we haven't met yet are with regard to new hospitalizations and with regard to hospital deaths. But in both cases, we're getting pretty close. So we haven't met those criteria yet. The governor has talked about 4 phases for reopening. The first would involve construction, manufacturing, agriculture, things of that nature. It'll be 4 different phases. At the end, we get to things such as entertainment and recreational facility. I think the 3rd phase involves restaurants, something that's of key importance here. So here we are, we're approaching the middle of May. You know, we are a seasonal community, a summertime community, and people want to know, what is all of this going to mean for the summer out here? What's going to happen with the beaches? What's going to happen with the economy? You know, at this point, we haven't met the criteria for reopening. You know, I would suspect that we might still be a couple of weeks away with regard to that before we reach the 1st phase. The governor's also talked about, excuse me for that, sorry. The governor's also talked about loosening some of the criteria with regard to low-risk outdoor activities. And we're going to see more guidance on that also before the end of the week. So, I mean, in conclusion, you know, we've been hard hit because we're part of an area that has been the most hard hit in the country. It's had an extensive impact on the economy. I think from a public health perspective, we have survived very well. I do have to give my shout outs to Southampton Hospital and to all of our first responders, healthcare workers, doctors, nurses, everybody who is in all of our healthcare professionals. They really did an excellent job in preparing for this, and it's been great. Economically, you know, there's still a lot of concern about what's going to happen next. You know, most of the towns and villages that I've talked to today, you know, they are talking about opening up the beaches on some modified level. Not business as usual, but, you know, for example, in Southampton, the town of Southampton is talking about for Memorial Day weekend staffing 3 of the beaches, Long Beach in Noyak, Sag Main, and Ponquag. So when I've talked to, you know, most, it seems as if you know, the beaches will be open, but that there'll be limitations. Limitations, obviously, with social distancing, with capacity, things of that nature. You know, we don't have all the details yet. I think they're still working on it, but that seems to be where we are. So the last thing I'll just conclude with is that this is a very fluid and very volatile situation. You know, the guidance seems to change rather rapidly based on the facts. You know, I do think that within a few weeks, if not less, you know, Long Island will be moving towards that 1st phase for reopening. So I'm going to stop there. I think questions, when we get to them after our other speakers, probably will be a better way to explore some of the things that are on people's minds. But that's kind of an overview, at least for now.
Thank you, Fred. We appreciate that. And I'm sure there will be questions. So now we're going to go right to Sister Mary Beth Moore to talk about what her organization has been engaged in over this last several weeks.
Okay, thank you, Catherine. Catherine asked that we just give a very short summary of who we are. Centro Corazon, it's based in Hampton Bays, and we serve people outside of Hampton Bays, Southampton, and a little bit to the west as well. We had 3 components. We had a flourishing educational component with a lot of skills classes for women linked to the English classes. We had babysitting for all of our classes. It was a very life-giving and positive thing that really we have not been able to resuscitate due to all the schools closing. BOCES is gone. So that's a real loss, and we haven't even had time to grieve it. It's just disappeared for now. Our other component was social work and casework and referrals. So it was it is a drop-in center, and anyone can drop in from a simple little translation of some letter or other to serious matters such as domestic violence and legal matters. We have a social worker. We never do anything with law, but we do refer. So we kind of give people an orientation and send them on their way. And the other component was advocacy. So we work a lot on the local level. We work with OLA for the driver's license push that was so positive. Other things I could mention. So that was our center, and three full-time people, some volunteers, paid babysitters, and an English teacher. And that was our work. And we switched so rapidly. There's parts of it that seem darkened from my mind of how we went from one day to the next. We were in the office March 16th, and March 17th we were gone. We hit upon the notion of focusing on single moms. I was thinking about how lonely it is. It's hard for everyone, we know, with different kinds of impacts and different vulnerable populations, but we characteristically worked with the undocumented population. I always say that they come to us because the other immigrants don't need us. They're doing fine, they're working. It's the undocumented that run into hurdles for lots of different reasons. So we focused on undocumented single moms, and some people, some still newly arrived people, they've been here a year, 2 years, and they don't have a toehold in the world that surrounds them. And now, as we all know, everyone knows, when the tourist season starts to pump up the middle of March, that's when the landscaping starts, March 15th. March 15th was the very day that everything collapsed. So just as all of the financial resources were running dry through January and February with very little work, very reduced work for the tourist economy, everything collapsed right on top of it. So it left people in a very bad spot. So with the generosity of many neighbors, we've had a lot of private money come in, people trusting our center, and Long Island Community Foundation gave us a grant that represents many, many donors, local and Long Island donors. AFT, we're applying to them all for the East End. So we really have benefited directly from community generosity. And people sometimes thank me, oh, you're doing so much. I thank them right back again, because what we're doing could not be done. I would just be trying to cheer people up out of sheer, I don't know, Irish gab, which doesn't work in such a very bad situation. So it's very, it's touching to feel and experience that community support, and to be in a position to channel that money to the people most at risk. So every Thursday we've had a little distribution of food cards, some small amounts of cash, mostly single moms. We worked with, what's my stat here, 66 families, 51 households of single moms, 15 special circumstances such as disability or undocumented minors, or family with 4 or more children. And our criteria is not having any work or greatly reduced hours. And as most know, you folks who are activists know, that the persons who are undocumented are not directly eligible for any kind of relief. So I sort of ignore what everyone else is paying attention to, payroll protection plan and all that. Our folks are not eligible for any of that, nor are undocumented people eligible for unemployment, and so on and so forth. So we've focused on that segment who are not eligible for other resources. And I feel, I can't prove it, but I feel that it's been a gesture of hope, just taking the edge off people's desperation. We always start by saying, do you have enough food? That's another very positive thing of our area. The schools have been wonderful. Hampton Bay Schools gives out breakfast and lunch every single day, and 3 portions on Fridays. How they do it, I don't know, but there's St. Rosalie's Food Bank that works 3 days a week. Long Island Cares has 2 different spots. So we say to people, prioritize food. And I won't go into rent thing. Fred Thiele mentioned it, Mr. Thiele mentioned it briefly. Of course, many, many people are lacking rents, and so are the undocumented people. In kind of, what's the word I want? The housing that's not properly registered. We know it. There's basement rooms and side rooms and this and that, where the landlord does not want to say who he or she is. So it's difficult to create a system where they might be eligible for any rental assistance that comes down the way. And even though there's a moratorium on evictions, which we've said over and over to anyone who listen, when the landlord is right at your elbow saying, where's the money, pressuring you, and you don't have much clout to begin with, it makes it very, very, very unpleasant. So that's my little speech for the moment. Thank you all. Thanks.
Well, thank you, Sister Mary Beth, and thank you for all the work that your organization is doing, and for the humanity that you're showing at this moment. That's really what we all really need, or that's one of the things that we need. And food does come first. So I just want to say before we shift to Sandra that we did inquire of the Springs Food Bank or Food Pantry and the Sag Harbor Food Pantry to see if we could get somebody representing them to join us. And both places are quite busy, but they did share with us some statistics, which I will just very briefly share with you before we go to Sandra. In Springs, they usually serve anywhere from 40 to 70 families a week. And this year, as of April 30th, over 200 families have visited the pantry. So that's a total of more than 700 household members that they are, trying their best to service. The pantry is open only to families living in the Springs School District. And for those of you who don't know where it is located at the Springs Community Presbyterian Church across from Ashwell Hall at 5 Old Stone Highway. And their hours for food distribution are Wednesdays from 3 to 6. And I did happen to drive by there on a Wednesday evening, which is a day that I have off, and I was stunned by the large number of cars that were outside waiting to be serviced. In Sag Harbor, the food pantry is run by Evelyn Ramuno, Evie, who is 84 years old herself, and so she said she doesn't do Zoom, but she did share some wonderful thoughts with me. Evie worked in the Bulova watch case factory. So she's been a long time Sag Harbor resident, though she let me know that she's from Bridgehampton and not Sag Harbor. And those of us who are familiar with those distinctions will get a smile out of that. She says that they've seen dramatic increases in the past month. They've jumped from servicing around 60 families to over 120. Last week they had 104, so that was a bit of a dip. The families get 2 bags. One bag has produce, for instance, vegetables, broccoli, potatoes, onions, and fruit. The other bag contains meat, eggs, butter, rice, beans, bread, plus every family's getting 2 rolls of toilet paper now. So she says there are things that she could use because she has been there. The pantry also delivers to the elderly. Right now they're delivering to about 10 per week. And the way they've changed their operations is that before they had 36 volunteers. Now they only are allowing 12 to come in on Monday, practicing social distancing to put together all the bags that they need for the next day, Tuesday, when their pantry is open. And people come to the pantry based on their last name alphabetically. Every 15 minutes, they service a different part of the alphabet. And they receive, their sources of food are varied. They receive from Long Island Cares, from Island Harvest, and some generous local donors have made it possible for local businesses to supply them with hot food. Harbor Market 1 week supplied spaghetti meals to all of the recipients, and 1 week Cilantro's supplied burritos. So that's an update from those 2 pantries, and now we'll go over to Sandra to talk about Ola.
Great. Thank you, Catherine, and thanks to everybody at Peer for having us. And it's just nice to see the faces of so many friends. And one day we'll do this in person. So just quickly about Ola, I think probably everyone here is familiar with our organization, but just in case, Ola stands for Organización Latino Americana. We've been around since 2002, and we basically are a Latino and immigrant advocacy organization that works to make sure that we have fair, inclusive policies locally. So, and when I say locally, I mean the entire East End, the North Fork, and the South Fork, as well as at the county level. And then we do some advocacy work when it makes sense for us to do that at the state level, like the driver's license campaign that a number of you worked on and that Mary Beth mentioned. So we also provide leadership workshops and other kinds of programs for the Latino community. And that includes workshops in the schools and outside of the schools for youth, though it's not limited to youth. And then we also have a strong focus, in addition to our advocacy focus, on governments and good policies and good community police relationships. We also have a focus on the arts, because we understand that we are blessed with this amazing diversity on the East End, and we want to make sure that all arts are celebrated, including arts from Latin America. So going into what we have done in response to the COVID crisis, we really had to do a tremendous pivot, similar to what Mary Beth was referring to, that just from one day to the next, everything just shifted. And while we're not typically or primarily a direct services organization, we certainly are doing that right now in a big way. So we have been mobilizing volunteers and setting up systems internally in relation to making sure that people get the food they need, and other kinds of things. So in terms of the food needs, which are huge, we have two main things in place. One is a volunteer network that makes sure that people who are homebound and cannot get to the grocery stores, regardless of the reason that they're homebound, it might be a physical disability, it might be just a circumstance at home, it might be that they don't have a car or a car that's working. So when people cannot get to a grocery store or a food pantry, then volunteers, we have one volunteer assigned to each family, and the volunteers do the shopping and then deliver the shopping, the food to the family's door, the household's door. So the number as of today is 77 households that we're serving in this way, which is well over 200 people. And these households, most of them include children. So yes, the kids are getting foods from the schools, but the rest of the family needs to eat as well, and that needs to be supplemented. So we are encouraging people to go to the food pantries when they can, if they are mobile. But if they are homebound, as these families that I'm describing, then we have a volunteer assigned to do that shopping. The other food crisis response that we have in place is the giving out of gift cards in a pretty systematic way. So we are trying to serve as many people as possible, basically from Riverhead, even as far away as Mastic, to as far east as we go on the South Fork. And we've been lucky enough to get a number of donations, and those donations are paying for these, $100 gift cards to Stop and Shop in King Cullen. But we also received gift cards, thousands of dollars worth of gift cards from United Way of Long Island. So that's been a tremendous help as well, to have those gift cards to give out. And we will do that as long as we can do it. It's not a sustainable, situation that we're in right now, but we will do this as long as we are able to do it. So we are also providing, when it's an extreme emergency, that when someone needs medical transportation, we are providing taxi service, paying for that so that people can get their medical needs taken care of. We had a case where it was an infant, a toddler, I believe, who needed an emergency x-ray, and that involved a trip from East Hampton to Hampton Bays, and then back to the child's home in East Hampton. And that gets to be a very expensive proposition. But again, as long as we can do this, and as long as Mary Beth said, people are being so generous, we will continue to do it. And then, of course, there are people who are not able to pay their rent. We, by the way, are not publicizing in a big way any of what we're doing, just because we would not be able to handle all of the need. But in very extreme circumstances, when we know of a family or two or three who are really suffering for one reason or another and can't pay their rent or can't pay the utilities, then we are offering cash assistance with that. So again, this is not the kind of work that OLA has been doing all of these years. We mostly focused on systemic change. with some direct legal services, and we do have a direct medical transportation service that we've been running for a couple of years, but now everything is shifted. We've also been trying very, very hard to get as much information out there as possible about the evictions moratorium, about health and safety in relation to COVID, about Medicaid, SNAP, other kinds of benefits that people might be eligible for. Undocumented immigrants are not eligible for any of these benefits, but their US-born children are. And of course, many families live in mixed status families. So you might have a US citizen married to an undocumented person. So there might be people in that household who are eligible for some government benefits. So we are referring people to the appropriate folks, including Sister Mary Beth, who will help people with SNAP applications. SNAP, for people who might not know, is food stamps, help them with those applications in Spanish over the phone. We also, just going back to kind of systemic change that we work on, something that Minerva's been very active in and, really initiated this. Minerva Perez, our executive director, initiated this along with a community member named Abena Asari, was to put pressure on Suffolk County to make sure that there was a hotline in place, a dedicated hotline for food emergencies for homebound people, right? So that it wouldn't all fall completely and primarily on the nonprofit community. So after weeks and weeks and weeks of conversations with the county, and after we started, along with Abena Asari, a change.org petition that some of you may have signed and that received thousands of signatures, the county finally has moved on this and is working to create a coordinated plan with the towns. And our understanding right now is that many towns, and this is not just East End towns, but Suffolk County towns in general, many towns have come on board with wanting to do that kind of coordinated plan with the county. And then the county's line that exists, the 311 line, will also be used as this food crisis for homebound people hotline. So that's a success that we've experienced recently, that this is now in motion. And then I'll just close by moving a little bit to something else, which is that the census is extremely important. As we know, this is how our region gets the federal dollars that we need to get, so that if we have another pandemic or whatever kind of medical emergency, for example, in the future, that we can make sure that our hospitals and our clinics and other healthcare providers have the funding and the equipment that they need. So here's the reality with the census, is that we were going strong until COVID hit mid-March, and we had to stop all of the in-person outreach that we were doing. We continue to do a lot of online social media outreach in Spanish via videos, encouraging the Latino community to fill out the census form online or over the phone. The problem is that it's not necessarily primarily the Latino community on the East End who is not participating in the census. Today, I learned from our Census Bureau partnership representative, or partnership associate, I think his title is, Steve Collins. He called me to say that the national response rate for the census is 58.7% at this point. So, okay, decent. For this is what they call the self-response period, when we, take the initiative and go online or call the number and participate in the census in that way. So 58.7% nationwide. Here in East Hampton, for East Hampton town, it is 18%, 18%. Yes, Julie, that is the face that I made too. So in Southampton town, it is 20.4%. Now, why is this? I think a lot of it has to do with second homeowners, just, whether they fill it out here or fill it out in New York, but it's not exclusively that. It's also that there are so many PO boxes in our towns. Something like half of Southampton town is PO boxes, and a whole lot more of East Hampton town is PO boxes. Well, the Census Bureau is not allowed to deliver anything to a PO box. It has to go through the US mail and land in somebody's mailbox at the end of their driveway, right? or the Census Bureau person will come to your door and put information about the census saying, hey, go online, or call this number. But when the Census Bureau folks were supposed to do that in March, that's when COVID hit. So they were forbidden from doing that. So that means all these people with PO boxes here on the East End, on the South Fork in particular, never received any information whatsoever about the census or how to fill out the census online or over the phone. So I think that is the big reason that we have such lousy participation during this self-response phase. So one of my calls to action to you all is, please, anything you can do on your social media or in any other way that you can think of to get the word out there to everyone. And again, we're trying to take care of the Latino community as best we can and do these messages in Spanish. And I have other ideas for what we can do. But just reaching out to your own networks in English or Spanish or whatever language works for your network to encourage people to fill out the census. And the website that you want to give them is my2020census.gov, G-O-V, my2020census.gov. And my other call to action is that if anybody is interested in volunteering with OLA, we have 55 volunteers right now. We can always use more volunteers if you would like to be a part of our food delivery networks or be working with us to help get word out about the census. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Sandra. Thank you for that. And let me ask you, Sandra, how should people, those who want to volunteer, how should they contact you?
I think the best thing is to you can call the OLA number, which is 631-899-3441. So 899-3441. You will get an answering machine, but someone will call you right back, and that will likely be our crisis coordinator. We've hired somebody new to kind of manage all of the food delivery and other crisis efforts. So please call that number if you're interested in volunteering. Thank you very much.
Okay, great. Thank you, Sandra. I've just put that in the chat for anybody who wants to just grab that if you didn't get it. And also the my2020census.gov is there for folks. Julie Sheehan, who's just popped something into the chat, is collecting all of this good information, is going to put together a peer sheet of information for folks to have, and we'll be sharing that via Facebook, our email, and other ways. So now we're at the question portion of our meeting, and so you can put questions in the chat, or you can raise your hand with the hand raised icon. I'm going to start actually by picking up on what Sandra just said about the census and the low rate of response here on the East End, and ask Fred if he wouldn't mind talking about that, if he's heard about that, if there's something that he knows that might be going on to try to remedy that.
Well, as you know, the census typically, these census day would have been April 1st, right? And as was said, right in the middle of the pandemic, really has disrupted all of our efforts. Certainly those of us in state government, local government, we've all been, we all had major campaigns underway, things we wanted to do, and social media, press releases, mailings to get people to participate in the census. And then, it's all kind of gotten lost. So, I know for myself, we continue to highlight for people on my social media page, all of it, for people to participate in the census. Obviously, there's going to have to be some sort of adjustment in the time frames, et cetera, to allow people to participate. And I think we need to advocate for that, to make sure that at the appropriate time that we still allow people enough time to participate in the census and have the opportunity to make sure that people have the information and participate in the census. So I think that's the main thing. I think it's really hard to get people's attention right at the moment for the census. We're all still doing it. We're all still trying, but it really is, the message to a large degree is getting drowned out by COVID, because that's what people are really focused on. So I think, the main thing is, and by the way, those numbers for a resort in a seasonal area, I remember that, obviously we did not have the pandemic, but, early on in the census in a community such as ours, it's very seasonal. We always start out with low numbers. So that part of it is not unusual, but obviously we're gonna have to make an extra effort now, because this whole system has been disrupted. But I think more than anything, we just need to make sure that there's enough time and that the system is adjusted in a way that allows people to participate and focus back on the census before this all closes out.
So I'll just say thanks, Fred, that the Census Bureau did push up, it adjusted its timeline somewhat. I don't know if they'll need to adjust again. So the self-response phase, where we again go of our own volition and participate rather than having somebody knock on our door and do the census in that way. All of that has been pushed until later, so there is time.
I suspect we'll need more.
Right, I agree. Yeah. I agree. And I think that, the Census Bureau is keeping close watch on all this as well, of course. I did want to say that we set up what the Census Bureau calls complete count committees. Back in February, I convened a lot of people in Southampton, and then so a complete count committee in Southampton, and I set one up in East Hampton as well. By the time we had the meeting for East Hampton, we had to do it by phone because at that point we were not allowed to meet in person. So that was, second week in March, something like that. And the complete count committee includes people from different sectors. So from education, from business, from the nonprofit sector, from houses of worship, et cetera. And because obviously one or two organizations, we can't do it on our own, right? And we need everybody to be participating in this. So I have had to put my own efforts on pause in relation to the complete count committees, but I will reactivate those and, we'll put our heads together and see what we can do.
Just as a point of information, Sandra, when you say that they've moved the date, do you have any actually date? What are the current deadline dates, just for people to have a sense of that?
I'm sorry, I don't have that in front of me. It's not that there's a deadline. So there's not a deadline for filling out the census. It's that it saves the government a lot of money, so our taxpayer money, if they don't have to send as many enumerators to people's houses and do this in person. And for our community, for the Latino community, we care about that a lot because it's a very scary thing to have a stranger show up at your door and knock on your door in the age of ICE, and you don't know who's going to be knocking at your door. So people are reluctant to open the door. So our message to the community is avoid that altogether by just going online. It's a safe process. There's confidentiality protections in place. We as a trusted advocacy organization here on the East End think it's a good idea for people to fill out the census, or if they want to do it by phone, there's a line for them to do it in Spanish. But in terms of deadline, there is none. All I know is that and these dates keep shifting, but the self-response phase has been extended, and then it will be, I think they're looking to start the enumeration phase, so the door knocking phase, in June is the last that I heard. But as Fred says, that might need to get shifted as well.
Okay, great. Thank you. And Fred, who should we advocate towards to extend that deadline?
Well, I think, state and federal government representatives. The census is federal, so obviously it's the federal government that would make the decision on that. So, the first extension, and I think Sandra was right, I think it was the end of June. July 1st sticks in my head as far as that self-response phase. But I do think that probably will need to be extended. But, the census is a part of the federal government.
Right. So our congressional representative and our senators. Okay. Yeah. All right. So, Julie, I don't know if you've been monitoring the chat to see if there's any questions in the chat. And I know that Catherine or Katerina, we're looking to see if we have any hands raised. Julie's hand's raised.
My hand was raised selfishly for myself. There's no questions in the chat yet, but by all means type them in there, other than clarification that Ola is serving primarily the East End, and Sandra jumped in and said that, which brought up a question for me. Mary Beth, maybe you could talk a little bit about west of the canal, volunteer opportunities, calls to action, things that, ways to get involved with your organization. Whoops, you need unmuting.
Hang on. Could you, Mary Beth, would you just start over because I just unmuted you?
Sure. You know, I hesitate to say, we don't have the capacity to manage volunteers, a whole lot of volunteers, and many of the volunteers we do have, they're either Latino people or older people, and I just have had a lot of hesitation in encouraging the demographic that matches my white pate to be going out and in close contact with young families whose level of contagion is really totally unknown. So I feel abashed. I think I should be saying this or that is a volunteer opportunity, but I'm not able to manage it, honestly. Especially working from home and trying to do what we're doing. So that's where it stands for us at the moment. And I know the food pantry as well is working. They have well, I'm not in charge of it. That's my colleague, Catherine. I can't speak for her, of course. But I do know that she already does have volunteers. I think she has a system where she has as many as she needs for the current demand. Again, but I can't speak for her. So I'm sorry. I'm sorry that I can't offer more possibilities.
Well, we're always looking for more to pile on our plate. Would it be fair to say that Long Island Harvest and Long Island Cares came up as two organizations?
Yes, absolutely.
Very
Yes,
easy donate and volunteer.
that's right. Both of those organizations, right? And
those are both on that contact list, and
Yes.
I'll post that again in the chat at the end of our session. Go ahead.
No, that's it. Thank you.
Okay.
So I think basically the way those food banks work, the ones you named, Julie, is they are the distributors to all of our local food pantries, right? And I think it's Long Island Cares that has also a new sort of place set up in Hampton Bays at the middle school. But in terms of west of the canal, you know, as I said earlier, we gratefully accept volunteers because we serve the entire East End, and we actually have fewer volunteers. I live in Hampton Bays, and we have fewer volunteers out here and in Riverhead than we would like. So, you know, spread the word. Thanks.
Okay, I guess there's one more question in the chat that I see. Heidi has asked how best can donations be made to Ola? So Sandra, if you want to just...
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I didn't see that. Thanks, Heidi. So if you're talking about monetary donations, then you can send a check. I think Catherine or somebody provided our PO box earlier in the chat. So if you just scroll up in the chat, yeah, it's I'll say it. It's Ola of Eastern Long Island, PO Box 278, Sagaponack 11962. If you want to send a check, or you can go to our website, which is also here that Julie provided it. Thanks, Julie. Ola of Eastern Long Island.org, and there's a donate page there. And we would be ever so grateful. Thank you.
Thanks. I see Michelle Gittleman has her hand raised, so I'm going to unmute her.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. I was just curious, Sandra and Mary Beth, are enough donations coming in? Is money an issue? Does that donation effort, can that be organized, leveraged somehow? There's a lot of untapped sources, so I'm just curious if there's enough.
Well, Sandra and I have spoken, you know, every now and then we connect with each other, and we have I would say, yes, we need money, and we would accept the money. We've gotten donations through the, as I mentioned, Long Island Foundation and also AFTI. So they're looking to us, and I think probably Ola has been in contact with them. That's a very good distribution center. Like if people send money there, they've been very generous to us because they know we can get it to the grassroots quickly. So that part is very good. I mean, how much money we're going to need, I'm not good at that number business. Housing is a black hole. You know, I don't want to be just be a discouraging word here, but we can give distributions, and I think Sandra would agree. You know, we can keep on doing what we're doing while the money lasts. If and when it runs out, that gives me a great anxiety. What about June? What about July? What about August? You know, I know how much money we're spending per week. That it's finite, and yet people continue to be generous. Doesn't sound like as clear or as precise an answer as I'd like to give, but it's a scary thing because.
Catherine, if I could address that too, because I've been actually the AFTI board meeting was at the same time as this, and I do some pro bono, do some legal advising for them. I've helped set it up, so I've been involved with AFTI and helping them to raise some money. Really, food insecurity, as we've discussed tonight, is a major issue, and you know, AFTI is all for the East End. It is kind of an umbrella organization to help all of the food pantries across the East End, and they've raised about $750,000 thus far, and some of those grants have already gotten out the door, as has been mentioned. So you know, you could go to the AFTI website also if you'd like, and you know, you can kind of see what's going on there, and if you wish to donate. But you know, what was said though here is a concern, and that is, quite frankly, in the work that I've done in helping AFTI and helping to raise money, there's so much generosity in the community. We're almost bouncing off each other, you know, with different efforts in different locations. You know, like the Sag Harbor Partnership, for example, where I live in Sag Harbor. And so there's lots of efforts at the moment, you know, to raise money and all of that, and it's been an excellent response. But you know, my concern is the one that was just expressed, and that is, you know, this isn't like Superstorm Sandy. This is not like a couple of months, or this issue of food insecurity, and then I think housing also, you know, particularly when there is, at some point, there will be an end to the moratorium on evictions. But this is a long-term problem. And you know, we have to find a way to make this sustainable, I think, over the long haul. You know, with the first outbreak, everybody wants to give, but, you know, the economy, our economy, there are going to be issues for a long time. And it's not just going to be a couple of weeks or a couple of months, but we're going to have to worry, you know, not just about the summer, but the fall and next winter. And I do think we need to be focused on not just meeting the need right at the moment, but making sure we can keep all of these charitable efforts sustainable, you know, over a fairly long period of time.
Yeah. Can I just jump in for a second, Catherine?
Okay, Sandra. Yes.
Yeah, sustainability is a real issue, as we were saying earlier. And there have been, you know, foundations, not just the Long Island Community Foundation and All for the East End, but foundations nationally, foundations statewide have really been coming together to pool emergency funds and get it out to organizations like ours. You know, again, we don't know how long that is going to last. But it's, you know, I think what we're doing in terms of you know, Sister Mary Beth and others, is you know, putting the finger in the dam, or you know, just kind of, it's a Band-Aid, and it's a very important Band-Aid and for people right now. But we have to get at the systemic issue here of the fact that the federal government is not providing relief to undocumented people. And I think that's where PEER can be of great service. If you haven't already, they're, you know, signed on to a petition that the New York Immigration Coalition has been circulating. or you can start a petition of your own, whatever you like, but just, pushing government to be inclusive in its relief efforts, because the more people spiral down into poverty, when they were already living at a marginal level, and then the spiral just keeps going and going and going, and with the added uncertainty that we don't know, as Fred is saying, when this COVID pandemic is going to end, and then what the fallout will be, which will extend months and months and well into next year, I'm sure, for these families, because just because there's a moratorium on evictions now, what happens when then suddenly, 3-5 months from now, the families need to pay all the back rent, but they were earning nothing and the federal government was providing no relief. So I think we can put pressure on the federal government, but also the state government, and that might have been actually the effort by New York Immigration Coalition, was to focus on state government relief for undocumented people.
Great. Thank you, Sandra. I mean, if anything, the epidemic has pointed out the huge income inequality in our country, and we need on all levels to try to figure out a way to remedy that, and that's a huge systemic change. But anyway, I see that Ron and Andy have their hand raised, so I'm going to unmute them and ask them to ask their question. I'm having trouble unmuting them. We're probably unmuting each other at the same time.
How about now?
We can hear you.
Yes.
Okay, great. Less a question than just a comment. I wanted to alert you to something we're doing. Catherine asked me to speak about this, Catherine Levy. Our temple Adas Israel, is working with Ola to adopt some of the families. Sandra mentioned how many families they're working with now. We're trying to take some of the burden off by something we're calling Adopt a Family, to meet the weekly needs of families who are severely food challenged. We have about 50 volunteers. We are now feeding 8 families a week, ranging from a single mother with 1 or 2 children to families of 8 who are multi-generational. And we can take on some more families. The way we do it is to have at least 10 volunteers for each family to provide the food that the families request, so that we're bringing them food that their family wants. We have 1 contact person, so we're respecting their privacy and their dignity. And we drop off food at the temple in bins, and then the family comes to pick it up. So, we're also very concerned about social distancing and keeping the volunteers and the families safe. We can take on some more families. We're also willing to advise any other groups, whether it's a faith-based group or otherwise, who wants to do the same, to help you set up the kind of schedule that we've set up, which seems to be working very well. And we're going to continue to do this on a weekly basis until we think that the need has eased up.
Yeah, thank you for all you've been doing, Andy.
We all have to do what we can. And so you don't have to be a member of our congregation to participate. So
about half are members.
Only about half are members. We have some members from the Southampton Democratic Committee, as well as other members of the community. So,
And where are you working out of?
Sag Harbor.
Okay.
We do have some volunteers who are able to make deliveries of the food. The food is dropped off at the temple in bins during set hours. And we do have a few people who volunteered to drive that to homebound families who don't have a car or can't get to the temple. But right now, we're working with about 8 families. And if we can get some more volunteers, we can take on some more families.
We also have, we set up the template with the Southampton Dems. So they're doing some west of the canal.
So yeah, so if you have more families, we've been mostly east of the canal, although we do have a family in Riverhead. If you need some more help in the western part of the East End, I can put you in touch with one of our members, Joy Flynn, who has been coordinating that effort west of the canal.
Thanks.
Okay, great. Thank you. I see Julie.
Yes, there's a wonderful question in the chat from Jackie Gavrin. Is there a fund or organization that helps with rent and back rent that you guys recommend we donate to?
So I think that, as I said earlier, we're helping select families, in very specific cases with rent. Sister Mary Beth, I think you all are doing the same, or about to start, right? So, rent's expensive. Any donations in that way would be amazing. I know that further west, Jobs with Justice, Long Island has a solidarity fund that is going towards food, rent, just like what we're doing. Except our efforts are focused on the East End and their efforts are focused further west. But most of the money in their fund is going towards undocumented immigrants who are also, who are not getting government relief. So, it just depends if you want to keep it local or contribute to another organization further west.
Yeah, I had the liberty with the earlier free donations to give small cash donations between $150 and $400, which is not even a third of the rents for 1 month. But that's what we've done. Just, as I said, it takes the edge off. Yeah, and I want to just echo what Sandra said about structural efforts and the importance of including undocumented workers. Families, I always like to just say again what we all know. So many of the workers keep the East End going. All the dishwashers in every blessed restaurant from here to Montauk, most are Latinos, immigrants, and a good proportion are undocumented. They have given us their sweat, and now they're, just cast aside. It has to be remedied, and we have to keep the pressure up.
Fred, what about you? Is there any talk in Albany about rent moratoriums?
There's talk, at this stage. I mean, there's some legislation pending. I would expect, where we are in the pandemic at the moment really is, in Albany, we passed the budget, which was an interesting experience in the middle of the pandemic. And we've all been back in our districts, trying to meet the needs in our districts. And the legislature is beginning to hold public hearings. There's a COVID hearing tomorrow on small business. There's one on Monday that I'm participating about the disparity of the impact of the virus in minority communities, and we'll be having more hearings. So I think at some point, we will be returning to Albany. Right now, we're kind of in the middle of the fight. And I can't underestimate we've heard the governor talk about this virtually every day. But our state budget is going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of $10 to $15 billion short of revenue. And the governor has estimated that, to respond just to the COVID virus, between loss of revenue, public health response, everything that we're going to need to do, that we're in need of about $61 billion from the federal government. So, I think there's certainly a desire with regard to helping with rent. I think there's a desire from, talking to some of my colleagues about helping undocumented residents. But if the state of New York, and I think this is going to be the case with a lot of states, if the next federal bill doesn't have assistance in it for state and local government, it's going to be catastrophic. Not just as far as trying to help people with rent and trying to help the undocumented, but simply, 20% cuts in school aid, 20% cuts to hospitals, aid to local governments. You know, a lot of the things that I think we're talking about, you know, as far as trying, you know, the state government trying to help, it's as simple as this. If we don't get state and federal assistance, we're not going to be in the position to do that. We're not even going to be in the position to do the things that we do now. And, you know, that will also raise the issue, I think, at some point in time when we return to Albany, you know, to supplement, you know, I've supported for quite some time and did in last year's budget when we were doing the Assembly One House budget bill. We need a more progressive tax code. We need to be raising more money for millionaires and super millionaires and billionaires. And so, you know, we need federal assistance, but we need to revise our tax code. And there's a bill that one of my colleagues, Aravella Simotis, Assemblymember Simotis, has introduced, and I'm a co-sponsor of. That needs to be part of this equation also.
Oh, that's absolutely accurate. I mean, we're pivoting to a comment that was made in the chat from Michelle about how we need to get more taxes from the super wealthy here in New York. So happy to hear that bill being mentioned. What, do you know the bill number by chance?
I don't have it in front of me, but you know, it's easy to find online, and I'll get it to you. You can post it, you know, tomorrow.
Great, because we'll then recommend that everyone contacts their the powers that be to get that, to help with that. We're happy to help with that. I see Ron has his hand raised again, so, and then Julie.
Yes, I wanted to tell you what I'm a small landlord. I have some small commercial tenants and some residential tenants, and many of the tenants cannot pay me. And now I realize that I can't get rid of them, but I don't necessarily want to get rid of them. So what I've proposed to them is pay me half the rent and I'll accept it. And it's a push on many of them, but they realize that by paying half, they're off the hook, and I get something. I'm digging into my own pocket to pay for maintenance and mortgage, but perhaps Sister Mary Beth and Sandra could advise your clients that they could make offers to their landlords. I mean, I'm in business, they're in business. Half a loaf is better than none. And perhaps, you know, we're all hurting by it, but it's some sort of temporary solution.
We are doing that, Ron. Thank you. You know, we do suggest to people in these video messages that we put out every time somebody comes and gets a gift card from my home who lives west of the canal, Riverhead, Massachusetts, Hampton Bays, West Hampton, wherever, and they come get a gift card for the supermarket. You know, I shouldn't say every time, but I have heard of people saying, oh, my landlady wants to evict me now, but we paid her $500, you know, so people are paying what they can, but we are advising people to work something out with your landlord and landlady. Some landlords and landladies don't want to work things out, but we are advising people to try to do that. And you're reminding me of something else, and I don't want to make, you know, put people on the spot here, but I would just say that, you know, anybody here, any of us, and our friends, if we have someone who regularly comes into our home to clean, please keep paying that person. Landscapers still have their jobs, but women who are housekeepers cannot go into the houses to clean. And I just really hope that people continue to pay their housekeepers.
Well, it's not just that. It's the person who cuts your hair. It's the person, you know, maybe you have a trainer.
Thank you, Ron.
Yoga.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
And, you know, obviously very wonderful suggestion to help everybody who is in our life that we can help, who we're not maybe seeing right now. So we want to pivot, but I know Julie's got her hand up, so I don't know if there's another question.
No, I was just flagging the Ron question.
Okay, great. So we want to pivot in the last 15 or so minutes here, 20 minutes, to have Fred talk a little bit about some of the election concerns and other general budget concerns if there are those that you want to. We have a primary coming up on June 23rd, and I wondered if you could share with us what you know about what's coming via absentee ballots, et cetera.
I'll try to quickly hit. There are a lot of elections, and not just the primary, but a lot of elections. So I'll try to just kind of give a summary of where everything stands with everything related to elections. First of all, school board, school budget. Those elections are typically held the third Tuesday in May. Those were postponed. And where we stand now with school elections, and these are very, very important, our school elections. I think they're going to be of critical importance this year as we go forward. But the school elections this year, both for school members of the school board as well as the school budget vote, which is critical importance, is going to be held on June 9th. Now, the time period has gone by now. You didn't even have to file a petition this year under the rules, under the executive order. You know, you didn't have to go out and get your 25 signatures. All you had to do was write a letter to the district clerk of the school district and say you wanted to run for the school board, and you would be on the ballot. So that time frame is now closed, though, for running for the school board. So whoever the candidates are, they are. But the school board vote and the school budget vote on June 9th is going to be done exclusively and only by mail. There will be no polling places for the school elections. It will all be done by mail, and each school district will have to send an absentee ballot with a postage paid envelope to every eligible voter in their school district. So this will be an all-mail, M-A-I-L, election for school elections. And, you know, the uncertainty, I think, is making some of the school districts nervous because, you know, typically the turnout on a school election might be 10 to 15, maybe at the most 20%. Every eligible voter is going to get a ballot. So I think it'll be an interesting civics lesson, first of all, to see what percentage of people vote by mail in school elections when everybody gets a ballot. So I would just be on the lookout. I think these ballots are, you know, it's June 9th. I think they're being printed now. I was talking to some school districts today. Please don't forget to vote in the local school district elections, and because these budget votes are of critical importance for the future of public education. So that's school, June 9th. Village elections. Typically, village elections are held on the East End in most of the villages in June. And there was projected to be very hotly contested elections in East Hampton Village, in Southampton Village in particular, but all of our villages, Sag Harbor, North Haven, West Hampton Beach, you know, all of the villages, Quogue, Sagaponack, they all have elections in June, typically. Those elections have been postponed. Those elections have been postponed until September 15th. And, you know, the petitioning process, you know, we don't know what that process is going to be yet. The governor will have to issue another executive order later on. So if you have an interest in village elections are postponed until September 15th. The village officials that are in office, whose terms normally would expire on July 1st, will hold over until those elections can be held. And that gets us to the primary, which is, I think, what you really are most interested in. Let me take it one step at a time. The presidential primary, the state of New York, the State Board of Elections attempted to cancel the presidential primary under the theory that there was only one active candidate left. That decision by the Board of Elections was challenged by the Sanders campaign and the Yang campaign. They both challenged, and a federal district court judge found that that was an illegal act by the Board of Elections and has restored the presidential primary for now. And I say for now because the New York State Board of Elections, in a decision that I opposed, to be honest, and was publicly critical of, have decided to appeal that lower court decision. So this whole matter is before a federal appeals court. I'm not sure. Obviously, election cases always take a priority. In this case, will have to be quickly expedited. I'm not exactly sure about when the case is going to be heard, but it will have to be heard soon, because June 23rd isn't that far away. Regardless of what happens with the presidential election, June 23rd is primary day for state offices and federal offices. And in fact, here on the East End, there is a Democratic primary for the state Senate district. And there's also a Democratic primary for the 1st Congressional District. So those primaries are on for the 23rd. There will be polling places, there will be early voting, but through the executive order, every eligible voter will be getting an application, again, postage paid envelope, return envelope, for an application for an absentee ballot. Frankly, I would have liked to have seen the ballot itself actually mailed, just as we are doing with school board elections. But I think there were concerns about the state constitution, where we were in the process of changing the state constitution to get rid of, really to eliminate absentee balloting where you need an excuse. Basically, provide for excuse-free absentee balloting. We haven't gotten the second passage of that. That'll be something that will ultimately be on the ballot, hopefully next year. But in the interim, there appears to have been some concerns about whether we could directly mail the ballot under the state constitution. But everybody's going to get an application so that they can mail in and get an absentee ballot. We certainly don't want to repeat what has happened in some other states. We want to give people the opportunity to be able to vote without risking their own health by having to go stand in the polling places. So hopefully most people will avail themselves of the opportunity to be able to vote in the primary by absentee ballot, by mail. Now that gets us to the general election, and we don't know what the rules are going to be yet for the general election. The primary was done under executive order during this emergency. I would foresee us, when the legislature returns, that we will hopefully, either by executive order of the governor if the emergency is still in place, or by act of the legislature, will do the same thing for the general election that we've done for the primary, which is to mail everybody an application for an absentee ballot.
So Fred, just a point of information, then I see Catherine Levy has her hand raised, but regarding the absentee ballot applications that we'll be getting and the surge of absentee ballots that may come in, I've heard people concerned that the system won't be able to handle all of the absentee ballots when they come in for the June 23rd primary. Do you want to comment on that?
Well, I would say this. Don't expect to get the results that night by 10:30, after the polls close. I think, it's going to be an arduous process to count these. Based on the discussions I've had with the Board of Elections, I think they feel that they can handle it, that they can get the ballots to the eligible voters and process them. I understand the concern. I think I share that concern. But I think we will be able to we'll have the resources to get people their ballots in a timely fashion for them to be able to get them back and get them cast. But I think the counting procedure on election night, you have to just be to be assumed that it may take several days to get the results when you're dealing with that many absentee ballots. As you may recall, the rules with absentee ballots are, they have to be postmarked by Election Day. But we have to wait, the Board of Elections has to wait like a week for them to come in before they can count them all. So, assuming that we're going to have a rather large portion of the vote by mail, it's going to be a while before we have the results.
May I speak, Catherine? Catherine, you unmuted me?
We can hear you.
Oh, okay. So first of all, I'm one of the plaintiffs in the suit to restore the presidential primary. So I can illuminate a couple of things about it.
That would be great.
It was Yang's lawyer, but the 13 plaintiffs who are the Bernie delegates are actually just Bernie delegates. It wasn't the Bernie campaign. They're all members of the New York Progressive Action Network, of which PEER is a chapter. And many of them are members of the state and county Democratic committees as well. The hearing for the appeal is going to be on Friday, this Friday. All of the filings have been done. Senator Sanders has done a friend of the court and amicus filing, and several voters from different walks of life have done amicus filings as well. I don't know when we'll have the result. I pray it's soon, because I am hearing a great deal of confusion from people about how they're going to cast their presidential ballot if there is a presidential primary. And there's an enormous amount of confusion altogether about the absentee ballot process at this point. So I guess I have a few questions for you, Fred. One, I'm unclear why. I think it would be so much better if people could be sent absentee ballots. And I don't understand why it's considered unconstitutional to do it for the congressional and state primaries, but constitutional to do it for the budget and school board primaries. I also don't understand why New York is not doing some of the things that other states have done. For instance, having drop boxes where voters can drop off completed absentee ballots. I can tell you from calling voters in the states that have already voted, that was incredibly helpful in enabling people to vote by absentee ballots. And we're so behind the curve on this, and I'm very concerned about it.
All right, well, there's a couple of things in there, so let me try to deal with them one at a time. General elections, the elections that we talk about, the elections that are held in November, the provisions with regard to absentee ballots, it's a different section of the Constitution. That's basically what it boils down to. I've read the Constitution also, and we had to stretch it just to make the COVID illness eligible to be able to be a basis for an absentee ballot. If it were me and it wasn't, I'd be sending the ballots. That's my opinion, but I'm just relating what it's going to be. The idea of having drop boxes, I think that's a great idea, and that is certainly something that we'll share. I'll share on our daily call with the governor's office, and to see if there's the possibility about that. I don't see any legal impediment to that. I do think we need to make this as easy as possible. You're absolutely right about New York. When we finally got early voting last year. We weren't exactly on the cutting edge of that. We were like the 37th state in the country to have early voting. So, with the, to be fair to those of us that are there now, a lot of the bills that would have made it easier to vote and, same day registration, all of the things that we're talking about were bills that we were able to pass and had support in the state assembly for many, many years. But didn't, the Senate was a different place until this last year. Anything that expanded the access to the franchise used to die a ignominious death in the Republican majority state Senate back in the day. So we are playing catch up. We have made a number of modifications. Including hopefully getting to voting by mail and early voting, and public financing of campaigns and things of that nature. So, we've got some catching up to do, but we're starting to catch up.
Okay, thanks, Fred. I see that there's a point of information in the chat, and then Gordon has his hand raised. But Jackie Gavron wants to know that if someone forgets to check the box citing illness, will their ballot be counted? A concern about some dirty tricks possibly in the counting of the ballots, I think, on Jackie's mind.
Well, you check the box on the application for the absentee ballot. So it's not going to be on the ballot. You know, I see, and he's got his hand raised, Gordon Hare, he works at the Board of Elections. He might be able to shed some light on how they're going to treat that. But I would hope, you know, the idea here is that everybody can vote by mail without the need of an excuse that typically you would need under the statute. So I would hope that that would be liberally construed, that if you file an application for an absentee ballot, but maybe when Gordon, I see he's got his hand raised, you know, he might be able to even shed some more light on that.
Okay, great. Thanks for that clarification, and I'll unmute Gordon. Go ahead, please.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Thank you. Hi, Fred, Sandra, everybody else. So, yeah, that is specifically in the governor's executive order that temporary illness it qualifies to vote by absentee ballot. So that's not going to be a problem. But I also wanted to point out, Fred, I'm sure it was just an error. The ballot has to be postmarked the day before the election. So June the 22nd, November 2nd, not the day of the election.
Okay.
So the last date to postmark it the day before the election. The other thing which I think is important to know is that, you know, the boards of election in New York State will do everything possible to make sure that the elections are successful. The elections are successful. The primary, the general. You know, these are people who really work tremendously hard, and they do a really great job. It's going to be very hard. There's no doubt about it. But one of the things which has changed this year, which I only learnt about today, is that the absentee ballot applications, instead of being mailed from the Board of Elections, which would be very onerous since it's on a skeleton staff, the printer who prints the applications will be mailing them out starting from this week, end of this week. There'll be 100,000 per week that'll be mailed, and there's probably going to be between 400 and 500,000 applications. So I think that's a great way to move the process forward and not to have anything that arrives late. So that's number one. Number two, obviously we have to, and the campaigns have to make sure that their voters return those applications. You know, once those applications in the voters' hands, the campaigns, they have to call their voters to remind them to send them back. And then the ballots will be sent out. So it's a very labor-intensive process. And of course, I agree with you, Fred, and Catherine and Julie. It would have been wonderful just to send out the ballots instead of the applications. Unfortunately, that's not the case, and that's not happening. So I think that it's going to be hard, but it will be a fair election. It'll be a fair vote. There won't be any shenanigans that go on. And as far as the employees at the Board of Election are concerned, they will do their very best to make sure that every ballot is counted, and that's what's going to happen.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Gordon. Let us hope that it is a fair election. We definitely want that for sure. I also want to say that folks, especially if you have been in a second home and away for the winter time, it was brought to our attention that some people may have been dropped off the rolls. So we wanted to make sure that everyone checks with the Board of Elections to make sure that they're still on the rolls. Catherine or Julie, do you have the website that they can go to check their registration? And if you do, if you could put it in the chat.
Catherine, I put in the absentee ballot link, but I will also put in the Board of Elections link. But Gordon, is it not the case? I just saw it a few hours ago that one can now fill out the absentee ballot application online, which is a new thing. Is that not the case?
Yes,
Gordon?
you can fill it out online, and there's an email to email it back to the Board of Elections. That's exactly correct.
Okay, great. Yeah, that's good for people to know. So listen, this is great. It's 8 o'clock. It's actually a minute past 8. So I think maybe we should wrap it up. I don't know if there's any last comment. And I don't see any hands raised. So I just really want to thank for all of PEER, Assemblyperson Fred, Sandra from OLA, and Sister Mary Beth from Centro Corazon de Maria for their time and for all the good works that they're doing in our community. There's a lot of great stuff in the chat, so we'll leave the Zoom window open for a while for folks who want to scroll through there. Julie has also been accumulating all of this information in a wonderful document that we will share via both email and on Facebook. The whole meeting has been recorded, even though we were not on Facebook Live, so we'll try to figure out a way to make that available for people in the near term to watch. So listen, let's unmute everybody, and everybody can give a big thank you to Elle.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Bye.
A big thank you to PEER for being an incredible ally on the immigration front. You guys are terrific. Thank you very much.
Happy to do it.
Love you, Ola.
Okay. Can't wait to see everybody.
Yeah.
Want to see you in person, everyone.
All right, we
Someday.
miss you. We miss you.
Go.
Let's stay in touch.
Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Hello.
Thank you, Mary Beth. Thank you, Fred. Thank you, Sandra.
Thank you, Sandra.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Fred.
You all rock.
Bye, Catherine.
Bye-bye. Be well,
Bye,
everybody. Take good care of yourselves. Okay.
How are you doing, Arthur? How are you doing?
I am okay. How are you doing?
I don't know. Okay, I guess.
Well,
I guess.